Claire suddenly discovered that their neighbors were moving in a panic. They decided to go out and say hello, but they didn't expect the neighbors to look at them as if they were monsters, turn around and run away. They went to the street and found that all their neighbors were running away in despair. It seemed that, except for them, everyone was running from something terrible. They didn't have time to think too much at that moment, so they also packed their things, followed everyone, and fled the city. But on the only road out of the city, they saw many cars driving in the opposite direction. They wondered why these people were running back again. When they reached the end of the road, they discovered that the government had blocked the town's only exit, ordering them all to return to their own homes and wait for news. They had never seen anything like this before and didn't know what was happening. At that time, a piece of gravel from the cliff fell onto their car. They followed the sound and looked up to the top of the mountain, seeing that the entire mountain was shaking violently, like a giant beast about to wake up. Suddenly, 2 jet fighters roared out from behind the mountain. Flying over the town without any warning, they directly dropped several incendiary bombs. The whole town was in flames in an instant. Everyone present was frightened by the shocking scene. At this time, the 2 fighters turned and flew in their direction. People were immediately terrified and fled in all directions. The family of 3 also ran toward the top of the mountain, because Claire knew there was a little-known refuge there. Not long after they ran out, the place that was just filled with people was blown into a sea of fire. It seemed like the government didn't want to leave anyone alive. They quickly found the entrance to the shelter. At this time, the 2 fighters were flying back toward them. The moment they closed the door, the bomb went off right over their heads. They didn't know how much time had passed. Father Ray discovered that a large amount of daily necessities was stored in the shelter, but they knew nothing about what was going on outside. Now the priority was just to survive in the shelter. They spent a whole year there. They had long become accustomed to life in the shelter. They locked the entrance tightly with chains because they knew the outside world had been occupied by unknown creatures, and they feared they might be the only survivors left in the world. The girl would often stick a periscope out of the vent. Suddenly, she discovered that something was moving in the distant forest. Her parents were searching for supplies outside the shelter. Seeing danger approaching, Zoe started shouting loudly. But her parents couldn't hear her at all. Zoe looked at the stairs deep in thought. Despite being warned numerous times not to climb out, Zoe wanted to save them, so she didn't care anymore. After she went out, she didn't see her parents. Had they been captured by the monsters? Zoe started shouting loudly until Claire covered her mouth from behind. At this time, the thing in the forest rushed toward them. It turned out to be just a few frightened deer. They breathed a sigh of relief, but Claire suddenly realized that these deer must be avoiding something more terrifying. They quickly fled back to the shelter. Ray locked the entrance in the darkness with a thick iron chain. They heard heavy footsteps coming toward them, but the footsteps didn't seem to find the entrance. Instead, they walked back and forth on the ground above their heads. Zoe was so frightened that she almost cried. In order to prevent the child from making any noise, Ray whispered to her to stay calm. Suddenly, there was a violent crash from the direction of the entrance. They went to the hatch and looked up, finding something outside already near the shelter entrance. They dared not make a sound and could only wait in despair and terror. But something unfortunate still happened. The pull ring on Zoe's doll got caught on a screw. In the next second, as she pulled away, the doll made a sound. In this silent environment, the sound was particularly piercing. Ray snatched the doll away, used a knife to take out the toy's voice box, threw it to the ground, and crushed it several times with his foot. Only then did the sound finally disappear. But it was all too late. The thing above had obviously heard the sound below. It started banging violently on the iron door, trying to open it with brute force. Although the iron door had been secured with chains, against such huge power, these chains appeared vulnerable. Several brackets holding them were torn off. Claire couldn't help but rush forward, grabbing the only remaining chain. She tried to use her own weight to hold the iron door, but despite this, the iron door was still slowly being pulled open. A pair of very yellow eyes appeared in the dark crack of the door. At this time, Ray rushed up with an iron rod and fought off that monster. This gave them some time to close the door, and he jammed the lock wheel with the iron rod. They thought they were finally safe, but the action just now had clearly angered the thing above. It summoned its nearby companions. The deafening sound of footsteps seemed enough to sweep the shelter away violently. That powerful force shattered the iron chains in pieces forcefully. Then, several pairs of strange eyes appeared at the hatch. The family began to flee deeper into the shelter, but there was no hiding place in this narrow space. They set the curtains in the passage on fire and brought in shelves to block the door, hoping this would stop the monsters from rushing in. But they also knew this would just delay them a little bit. At this time, Zoe discovered a vent to escape through, so Ray first lifted Claire up and helped her out. After Claire went out, she found that all the monsters had entered the shelter, so it was safer outside. She immediately picked up Zoe, but just when Ray was about to climb up, because his shoulders were too broad, he got stuck in the hole. Seeing the monsters chasing them getting closer and closer, Ray brutally broke his own arm just to escape from this small vent. But when he finally leaned out, and half of his body was about to escape that hellish shelter, a pair of big hands grabbed his ankle. He desperately left his last words to his wife, then was dragged down by that powerful force. After a while, there was a burst of heartbreaking screams and fighting sounds from below, until a thick stream of blood spurted out. The voice finally quieted down. Claire knew what had happened down there. Regardless of Zoe's hysterical struggle, she took her and ran deep into the forest. After passing through the forest, they reached the town where they had first fled. This place had become a ruin. By this moment, high walls had been built, and quarantine warnings were displayed everywhere. Suddenly, a helicopter appeared above them. The dazzling searchlights revealed the two of them, leaving them nowhere to hide. The helicopter launched an iron net, capturing them tightly. The two struggled desperately. Those monsters that were hunting them were now right in front of them. At this moment, we were surprised to find out that those were not unknown monsters at all, but fully armed soldiers in biohazard suits. They lifted their yellow night vision goggles and signaled to the helicopter to hunt down other survivors. At the same time, one soldier took out a needle to test Claire and Zoe's blood. However, the test results were condemning. The blood of the two had already turned the black color found only in infected people. It turned out that as early as the initial stage of the disaster, they had been exposed to the airborne virus. All these years, it was not monsters they had been avoiding. Instead, they were hiding from the soldiers who were cleaning up the infected. Now, these soldiers were about to kill them. Claire, losing control, desperately wanted to protect her child. Black veins spread from the corners of her eyes and gradually covered her whole body. Just when the soldiers were about to shoot, the father suddenly rushed out and stopped them. His mutated combat power exploded. In just a few seconds, he knocked the armed soldiers to the ground. But despite this, he still couldn't withstand the hail of bullets. He finally fell under the gunfire, but he had bought the mother and daughter time to escape. The mutated mother and daughter seemed to have completely lost their humanity at that moment. Until the last soldier was killed, only then did they slowly calm down and revert to human form. With the danger finally gone, Zoe and Claire rushed to Ray's side. He was lying there, gravely wounded. They stayed right there with him, holding on through the final moments of his life. But at that exact moment, Claire heard a terrifying sound in the distance. It was the helicopter that had been hunting them, circling back around. Claire and Zoe managed to slip away from the searchlights and found a sewer manhole. Down inside the tunnels, they ran into a young boy named Joey. He was Zoe's friend and next-door neighbor, who had somehow managed to survive against all odds. Joey led them through the winding underground passages. Before long, Claire and Zoe discovered a whole group of other survivors living in this subterranean space. People who were just like them. Finally, they climbed through the opening together, heading toward this underground community to begin a new life in the darkness of the post-apocalyptic world.